This is the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good morning, Tuscaloosa. Good morning, Tuscaloosa, Internet world, West Alabama. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. Hope you guys are doing well on this Thanksgiving Day. It is the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral, BamaCentral.com. You guys are watching us on the BamaCentral YouTube channel, Facebook page, wherever you get your podcasts. You're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify. The Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral can be found right there. We're going to have a lot of fun today. We'll keep it right straight to the point on this Thanksgiving Day. Get right into a discussion with our friend Peter Rauterkus of AL.com as it's Iron Bowl week. You guys are all getting ready to eat the turkey, have some ham, little mac and cheese, have some sweet potato casserole, but we're all looking forward to a big old Iron Bowl. So I cannot wait to talk to Peter Rauterkus of AL.com. You can find Peter at Peter_Rauterkus on the Twitter machine and read all of his work at AL.com as he's been covering the Auburn Tigers. We're live in the Derek Daniel State Farm Studios today. Call Derek for all of your insurance needs at 205-758-3391. Like a good neighbor, Derek Daniel is there. Call and find out how much Derek can save you today. Call them for your home insurance, your life insurance, your renter's insurance, whatever you need in the insurance realm. Well, they're off today, but they'll be back for Black Friday. Call them at 205-758-3391. And of course, we're brought to you by Purple Turtle Roofing. It is Thanksgiving Day, but get yourself ready for Christmas. Santa's going to be landing on your roof. Make sure your roof is ready. 877-787-6635 for a free roof inspection from Purple Turtle Roofing. We appreciate Brax Garrison joining us yesterday on the program. Had a lot of fun with him. We'll have him next week as well. We'll see how much weight he gained from his Thanksgiving meal, because I know I'm going to gain a lot of weight today. But we appreciate Purple Turtle Roofing for sponsoring the program, and we expect you guys to give them a call at 877-787-6635. So Mason Woods, you ready to talk some Auburn Tigers?
Let's get into it.
Absolutely. Let's welcome our friend Peter Rauterkus. You can follow him at Peter_Rauterkus on the Twitter machine, writing for the Auburn Tigers, covering all things Auburn athletics on AL.com. Peter, thank you so much for your time. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have a huge week, a really exciting Iron Bowl week with high stakes. Alabama's playoff lives are on the line. The SEC championship hopes are on the line. But Auburn, bowl eligibility is on the line, and bragging rights of ruining their rival season right there on the line. So big game in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Let's get to know the Auburn Tigers a little bit. And Peter, why don't you just tell us what these last 11 weeks have been like covering the program? Some really traumatic moments, the firing Hugh Freeze. Now DJ Durkin's in control. You got 3 different quarterbacks that have played. Just what's the year been like for you, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to talk about the last 11 weeks, you kind of have to split it up between the first 8 and then the last 3, since Hugh Freeze was fired at the beginning of November. And like you said, I mean, a lot has happened. If you just look at this team since Hugh Freeze was fired, I think there's definitely some differences. Obviously, DJ Durkin has taken over as interim head coach. We've seen Auburn play 2 games. They had the close loss in overtime against Vanderbilt, a game where the offense played as well as it had all season. And, the first game where Hugh Freeze wasn't the one calling plays. And then, come out, beat Mercer, obviously an overmatched FCS team, but you see Deuce Niken in a quarterback. He looks really good. And so now, DJ Durkin's 3rd game, you got the Iron Bowl. I mean, obviously the biggest game of the season for this team, not just because of the rivalry, but like you said, playing for bowl eligibility. DJ Durkin, he may not necessarily be the top candidate for this job, but obviously winning the Iron Bowl certainly would not hurt his chances. So it's a big game on many fronts.
Absolutely. Why don't you take us right into that? Because coaching search probably has the biggest umbrella storyline to this. What is the latest on Auburn's coaching search? Is it all in on John Summerall, or are they going to backdoor for Lane Kiffin? I know they were in that Lane Kiffin sweepstakes a few years ago, and then he decided to stay at Ole Miss. Or is DJ Durkin, does he really have a realistic shot at being named the full-time head coach, keeping the roster together, maybe saving a couple dollars on the coaching salary? What's your just feel of the Auburn coaching search in the future for the Auburn Tigers?
I think, like you said, I think Summerall is the leader. He's definitely not the only candidate. Durkin, I think, is the most fascinating one because, I talked to John. I had an interview with Auburn Athletic Director John Cohen last week, and he even mentioned that, Durkin's a candidate, but he's already started talking to other candidates about retaining DJ Durkin as defensive coordinator if they were to be hired. Conversations that he said have been going well. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, some of the other names that have popped up are, Clark Lee, Eli Drinkwitz. We've seen some of those names mentioned in other searches as well. I think, both of those guys obviously have won in the SEC. I think there's maybe a little bit more excitement around Clark Lee just because of what he's doing with Vanderbilt right now. But once again, I think Summerall is still candidate number one. What will be interesting with that is, Tulane, if they win Saturday, they'll be in the American Conference Championship. But if they win the American Conference Championship, they'll likely be in the college football playoff. So how does that affect, when and if you name a head coach? Obviously, you're going to name a head coach, but when you name a head coach and whether or not that would be Summerall. John Cohen has said that he wants to have a head coach named within 24 to 48 hours after the Iron Bowl. Does John Summerall, or I guess any coach, it could be the same with Clark Lee playing in the college football playoff, affect, the timing of that?
What's it been like covering DJ Durkin? How's he been? Obviously, we remember his time at Maryland, and then he was defensive coordinator a couple spots before he got to Auburn. What's really been your feel of covering him now that he is in charge of the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, obviously, when you have an interim head coach situation, you have a guy take over midseason. Most of the time they're not going to try and change everything right away. So I think things have been mostly the same. He's obviously a very different kind of personality from Hugh Freeze. When just in front of a microphone, doesn't necessarily talk as much, isn't going to give you as much, isn't as transparent, especially when talking about injuries and things like that. But I think the players, the players seem to really like him and embrace him. It's something that they've talked about whenever we've talked to players. And that was already the case when he was defensive coordinator. The defensive players would always talk about how good of a motivator he is, how good he was at connecting with players. And I think we saw that response on the field, especially against Vanderbilt, and they hope to get some more of that on Saturday.
You mentioned how much the players love DJ Durkin, and I think that's something that's really obvious when you watch this Auburn football team. You just see the way he interacts with guys on the sideline. You see the way he interacts with media and things, and it really seems like he is well-liked. What do is this fan base going to accept it if he is the head coach hire? Are they going to accept maybe not going to get the splashy name like John Summerall and instead, like Joe said, maybe saving a few dollars here and getting DJ Durkin to stick around as head coach?
I think they will if he beats Alabama. Whenever there's an interim coach, I think the sentiment changes by the week, right? If you win, they like you. If you lose, they want you out of town immediately, and lost to Vanderbilt, but that was a very close game. I think there were some mixed reviews from the fan base after that. What you do against Mercer really isn't, unless you lose that game, there's nothing you can really do against Mercer that's going to get people really on your side. But, if you're the Auburn coach and you beat Alabama, something that hasn't happened since 2019, that goes a long way. So I think if he does that, there's definitely going to be some fan support and some momentum.
We're talking to Peter Rauterkus, AL.com. Peter, on Tuesday, our friend Matt Stahl wrote a piece about, put out a piece about the haunting of Jordan Hare, or is Jordan Hare haunted? We consumed it a couple days ago. What did you think of his piece, and is Jordan Hare haunted?
Yeah, no, it was an awesome story. It was cool. I got to help out with it a little bit. We went and kind of scoped out the area. Not that we hadn't been in Jordan Hare Stadium before, but kind of did some investigating last week. He even gave me some of the materials to use at the game, this past game on Saturday. So no, it's a really good story. Matt obviously does a lot of great work. That's always been the thing about Jordan Hare Stadium. I've been, this is only my second season on the beat. We haven't seen Auburn get one of those huge wins. I guess other than beating Texas A&M last year, we haven't seen many of those huge wins, against top teams at Jordan Hare Stadium since I've been around. But it's definitely a crazy environment. The two programs that I've covered have been Auburn and LSU. Two places that are known as two of the toughest places to play in the country. I think they're different. They're not quite the same. Tiger Stadium is a little bit bigger, but obviously, Auburn, I think it's going to be absolutely rocking on Saturday, so, we'll see.
Well, why don't you take us to the most important position, and that's quarterback, because it's been pretty interesting to follow the quarterback position this year for Auburn, despite the lack of success, sitting there at 5-6. You play Jackson Arnold to get the season started for a while. That kind of had some rocky moments, but some positives as well. You bring in Ashton Daniels here and there. Don't play him against Mercer to preserve a red shirt, so we can play against against Alabama this weekend. Deuce Knight, as you already said, did look pretty electric against Mercer, but you've got three interesting quarterbacks. What do you think the quarterback plan is going to be on Saturday against Alabama?
Yeah, all signs are pointing to Ashton Daniels being the starter again, and I think just after what he did against Vanderbilt, it's hard to go away from him. What it would be interesting to see is, does Deuce Knight play some kind of role in this game? Is there a package for him? Are there certain situations in which Auburn wants to utilize his skill set, which, I mean, he showed against Mercer. Obviously, Bama's defense is a much different level, but he's obviously showed that he's got some athleticism. He's got some ability in the vertical passing game. DJ Durkin was asked about that on Monday, and he kind of laughed and said, like, oh, that'd be a great idea. I'll take that upstairs. So, not giving away much about what the game plan is going to be, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if we see Deuce Knight, play some sort of role in this game, even if he's not the starter.
I want to ask you about what you thought of Deuce Knight's performance last week. Obviously, the electrifying 5-star prospect that we've talked about him on this show
yards.
Of just wondering, like, where has he been all year? Why has he not played all season? Why did it take so long to maybe turn to him? Just how impressed were you with what you saw from him? And then, you mentioned maybe getting a package in this Alabama game. What do you think he could maybe do against this Alabama defense?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wasn't surprised with a lot of the stuff we saw against Mercer. I mean, we all knew Deuce Knight was talented. I mean, he was a 5-star for a reason. We saw some of it in practice. I think, we knew he was athletic. I didn't necessarily expect him to be as explosive as a runner as he was against Mercer. Obviously, like we've said, not the most athletic defense, but breaking off runs of 75, 50 plus. I mean, that's something that we haven't even seen from Jackson Arnold and Ashton Daniels this season, who are, both really good runners and have shown that. So in terms of what kind of role he could play, I think, you have to consider, okay, what can a guy like this, that kind of running ability, what can we use him for? Are there situations maybe in the red zone where we can bring him in? And, because it's not like he's just a runner, right? He's shown that he can be a good vertical passer. So if you put him in the game, the defense can't necessarily say, oh, they've got the running quarterback in, we can sell out for the run. So I think just with how dynamic he is, there's a lot of situations in which he can use him. I think the red zone specifically is where I would be watching, but there's a lot of different ways that he could be utilized even against a defense as talented and as athletic as Alabama's.
We're hanging out with Peter Rauterkus of AL.com. Make sure you follow him at Peter_Rauterkus. Peter, take us up front there, because all the attention goes to the quarterback, but Auburn's offensive line has really been a huge storyline, giving up the most sacks in the SEC. The running game has been kind of iffy. Maybe it's a lack of commitment to the running game. Maybe it's a lack of success up front. I know that Auburn went into the transfer portal over the offseason and brought in some offensive linemen. What did you make, or who has come in? Can you give us some details on what the offensive line is going to look like and maybe why it struggled this year?
It's certainly been an up and down year for that group. And, they took another hit around, a few weeks ago. I'm trying to remember exactly which game, when Connor Liu, I think it was Missouri, Connor Liu, their starting center, tore his ACL. After that, they try and put in Kill Ellis, the true freshman. He doesn't play super well, so they end up moving Mason Murphy, USC transfer right tackle, over to center. And that's been the combination the last couple of weeks, and it's worked out fine. But it's funny you mentioned the running game. For most of the season, Jeremiah Cobb has been a really good back for Auburn. He's got about a little over 900 yards. But against Mercer, Auburn finished that game with 270 rushing yards, but the running backs never really got going. Cobb and Justin Jones, the two backs who played in that game, only average about 3.5 yards per carry, which is a little concerning against a Mercer defense, which is a good FCS rush defense, but obviously does not match up with you, athletically and size-wise, and there's nothing compared to what you're going to face next week. So it's something I asked DJ Durkin about. He didn't seem too concerned. And Auburn's run the ball well in plenty of games this season, so I'm not necessarily super concerned, but it's definitely going to be something to watch. I think with the offensive line play overall, you look at pass protection, you look at the sacks, I think that's a big reason why we saw the switch from Jackson Arnold to Ashton Daniels, just because I think they're both mobile. but Ashton Daniels has shown a better ability to evade pressure and make plays getting out of the pocket. And that's something. Jackson Arnold took a lot of sacks that I think the coaching staff maybe saw as unnecessary during the season. I think Daniels has done a better job at avoiding those. So, I think that's helped with the offensive line play, but, still some issues in pass protection that I think Alabama is going to look to take advantage of.
Yeah, you mentioned Alabama maybe being able to take advantage of some of those opportunities. I mean, it's, Alabama has not been a team that has really been able to get a ton of sacks this season. So, I kind of want to take us to maybe the wide receivers here and kind of tie everything together, with Alabama being a team that isn't able to consistently finish plays in the backfield and get sacks like that, and Ashton Daniels having an improved ability to maybe get out of the pocket and make some plays downfield. How much do you see? I mean, obviously Cam Coleman is going to be a big part of this game.
Singleton.
But yeah, guys like Eric Singleton, how much do you see really just all of these Auburn wide receivers kind of, maybe being a thorn in Alabama's defense this week?
I think if you're Auburn, you want to win this game, they have to be. That's how Auburn unlocked the offense against Vanderbilt. I mean, it's, a pretty funny concept. You take your 3 or 4 or 5-star wide receivers and throw the ball to them. You works pretty well. We saw that against Vanderbilt. I mean, Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton against Mercer. Malcolm Simmons had his biggest game of the season, had more of a quiet year this year, but was a very good player last year, has some talent, very explosive guy in the slot. So, yeah, I think you're going to have to get the ball to those guys. It's Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton especially, but you have some depth. You have some different weapons there where you can spread the ball around. Be interested to see if Perry Thompson, gets going in this game. He's been a little bit more quiet the last few weeks. I mentioned it with Malcolm Simmons. Can they get the tight ends involved? Preston Howard, Brandon Frazier. So I think you're going to have to, especially, I don't think you're going to be able to rely solely on the run game in this game. But I think you have the weapons in the passing game to be good in that area.
Well, Peter, they turned it over. Really, Derek Nix is and one of the is calling all the offensive plays, and one of the silly emphasis is always calling all 3 downs of offensive plays or whatnot. What do you think his impact is? Of okay, it's his offense. He's calling every offensive play, and just kind of how much carryover do you see from the Vanderbilt Mercer week into the Alabama week? I mean, Vanderbilt has been very, very good, but maybe defensive talent not as good as Alabama. Obviously, Mercer is kind of not really comparable. But how much do you think you can carry over from, okay, this is Derek Nix's offense, this is what he's done against Vanderbilt, and it can carry into the Iron Bowl?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's changed with Derek Nix is that the offense has been more catered towards the strengths of the unit, which is something that we didn't see as much this season, which was kind of a maddening thing with this Hugh Freeze offense, and that you've got these great wide receivers, but the ball wasn't getting to them. You were doing things in the passing game that the quarterbacks didn't seem very comfortable with. There was a disconnect a lot of the time between kind of what the game plan maybe should have been and what the players were most effective at, performing and what was actually happening on the field. And even DJ Durkin said that was going to be an emphasis to change, in the first week that he became the interim head coach of Derek Nix. I would expect them offensively to do a lot of the same things that we saw against Vanderbilt and that we saw against Mercer, just because that is what this team is good at. And, it's hard to really just do a full offensive overhaul midseason. So I think, DJ Durkin has said this since he became the interim head coach. It's not going to be as much about, what we run, but who we run it for and, how we do it. I think that's going to be a big emphasis in this game against Alabama because you have talented players. I mean, we just talked about Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton. So I think, doing that, I think we're going to see more tempo again, like we saw against Vanderbilt. That was effective for Auburn. And I think that's going to be more key. I think how you do it and who gets the ball is going to be more important than how much schematically changes.
I guess I can take us to the defensive end there. Not sure how much more offense we can talk here. We kind of hit everything. Joe and I have mentioned that, this is not necessarily a great matchup for Alabama. The defensive front of Auburn has, been pretty solid this year, been one of the strengths of that football team. And the offensive line for Alabama has been really a question mark all year. You've been unable to run the ball, and the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, you've been unable to really protect Ty Simpson super effectively, and it's led to some turnover problems. How do you see this Auburn defensive line getting after the Alabama offensive linemen and maybe forcing Ty Simpson into some less than ideal scenarios here in this game?
I think there's going to be an emphasis put on that. I mean, that's something that Auburn has done a relatively good job at doing this season. I mean, they've got the defensive line has been the best unit on the team really either side of the ball this season. And, you look at a guy like Keldrick Falk, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick. You look at a guy like Kieran Crawford off the edge, who's really come on this season. And then, DJ Durkin has really liked sending pressure, especially in third downs and in critical downs this season. So I think against a quarterback like Ty Simpson, who's not as mobile as, some of the guys they face, he's not like facing a Diego Pavia or facing a Marcel Reed or John Mateer they played earlier this season. So I think we're going to see an emphasis on that. What's interesting about the matchup is, Auburn's secondary has been a little bit, weak over the middle of the field. So it'll be interesting to see how Alabama takes advantage of that. But I think up front, Auburn's going to want to do as much as possible to get him off his game.
Peter, is there any way we can get Keldrick Falk to slip to about 18, 19, 20 for my Chicago Bears?
Hey, we'll see. I wouldn't expect it at this point, but, anything's possible between now and April.
What makes him such a special player? Obviously the talent on the field, but what have you seen from him over 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, just physically, just such a prototypical good defensive end. I mean, 6'6", 285. He hasn't really lit up the stat sheet this season. I think he only has 2 sacks, but I mean, just a guy who's in the backfield every play. I mean, he's always getting pressure. He's become really good in the run as well. I think that's where he's most underrated is, his ability as a run stopper. I mean, looking at mock drafts, we've seen him comped sometimes as a defensive tackle. He may not be the guy that's coming off the edge and getting you, 10 sacks a season, but he's somebody who's going to affect every play. That's even when he's not putting up the big numbers. I mean, he's probably been the most important piece of this Auburn defense.
When you're looking into the secondary, you see, as you said, they're about middle of the conference in passing defense. What have been maybe the problem areas, and is there somebody that you think Ty Simpson is going to be looking for in the Auburn secondary to try to get after?
I think on the outside, like you look at your corners, especially Jay Crawford and Ken Lee, I think they've mostly been good. We haven't been seeing Auburn get beat a lot out there. What they've been really vulnerable is over the middle of the field. The safeties have kind of taken a step back this season. You're also playing some young guys there. Same thing with the linebackers and coverage. And so you've seen some busts. You've seen, some matchups and some guys just getting beat, on routes over the middle and routes down the field over the middle. So if I'm Alabama, that's where I'm attacking. I'm trying to create matchups with, with a linebacker, an advantageous matchup where you can get a slot guy matchup against a safety. If I'm Alabama, that's where I'm attacking because, on the outside, we really haven't seen Auburn hurt that much. I mean, Jay Crawford, I think, has been really, really good in coverage this year. Hasn't really been attacked. Same way with Kane Lee. They've gone after him a little bit more, but I think the middle of the field is the area that I would circle going into this game.
Something that me and Joe talked about earlier on the show is seemingly, and even going back to Nick Saban's time as head coach at Alabama, this game has maybe meant a little bit more for the Auburn program than it has for the Alabama team. Is that something that you have really noticed as well in just the 2 years covering? I know you said, it's only been 2 years, so maybe you haven't had quite the opportunity to see it as much, but is that something that you've kind of picked up on, maybe even just heading into this week?
I think that's fair, and I think that's natural when you're the underdog, and that's typically what Auburn's been. If you look at this game over the past few years, and going to be like this year as well. It's Alabama is in this game just trying. It's another game and trying to get to the playoffs or get to the SEC championship. And in a case like this week, you need to win this game. I mean, it's a critical game to do that, but it's not so much. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Alabama fans or Alabama players don't care about the Iron Bowl and beating Auburn. But, that's the bigger focus is getting to the playoffs, getting the SEC championship. If you're Auburn, obviously, yes, you want to get bowl eligibility. That's been the case going into the game this year. Was the same thing last year. But being able to do that against Alabama and now this year having the ability to knock your arch rival out of the college football playoff, I mean, I think that's huge. And I think just when the circumstances like that, I think that's pretty natural. And, I think if it was the other way around, I think we'd be saying this about Alabama. That just hasn't really been the case as long as I've been around this game.
We're hanging out with Peter Rauterkus in just a few more minutes here on the Joe Gaither Show. I want to take you back into the schedule, Peter. And everybody sees, 5-6. Oh, Auburn, no good. Fired their coach, blah, blah, blah. But you look at it a little closer, and it's a 7-point game against top 10 Oklahoma. It's a 6-point game against undefeated Texas A&M. It's a 10-point game. You're up at halftime on Georgia, college football playoff team. You barely lost to Missouri. As we said, we've already outlined the overtime loss to Vanderbilt. So it's not like Auburn has been really blown off the field in any of these games, in any of these high-profile games. Just what's been what's been missing in these games? I mean, you're you're a play away, you're a couple circumstances away. Obviously, there's been some controversial calls in a lot of these games. Just what's been your perspective on what's missing with this Auburn team?
That's a good question because it hasn't necessarily been just one thing. I mean, each game, it seems like it's been something different each time. I mean, the common denominator earlier in the season was just the offense not being able to make enough plays, the offense not being able to get the job done. We saw that kind of flip against Vanderbilt where the offense had its best game of the season, but you just couldn't get enough stops against a really good Vanderbilt offense. And then I guess the offense had a chance late, but you just couldn't quite get into field goal range and get the game over before overtime. So, I think the interesting thing about that is how different are things now with DJ Durkin in charge instead of Hugh Freeze. Obviously, like I said, Vanderbilt, it was still a close loss, but it happened in a different way. So if it's against Alabama, let's say you get into a game, things are going the way they maybe did against Missouri or maybe did against Georgia. Are things different because you've got a different play caller, you've got a different game manager? I think it's still kind of a wait and see type of thing. I think obviously this team is talented enough to hang with and beat all these teams that they've played. Can they actually do it, on both sides of the ball? Yeah, I think it's game 12 and we still don't know.
Well, that takes me perfectly into my last question here. Really just in, a short few words, a sentence, whatever you want to do. Auburn wins this football game if blank.
I think if the offense keeps playing at the level it does and, the defense can shore up, in coverage in the middle of the field. I think if they can, slow down Ty Simpson, force a turnover or two, and the offense does what it did against Vanderbilt, I think Auburn will win this game. But, that's easier said than done.
We're hanging out with Peter Rauterkus of AL.com. And Peter, we usually on Fridays play 3 players to watch on our Football Fridays, talking about the Alabama perspective. I'd like for you to take your spin on from the Auburn perspective. These can be 3 players that you think are most important to Auburn's efforts, or maybe 3 players that will surprise people. Just 3 players that you've got your eyes on that you think, oh, these guys are important to win this ball game.
Yeah, I'm going to start on defense. I'm going to go with Xavier Atkins. I mean, he's been one of the best players on this team. At least going into last week's game, I haven't checked this week. He was leading the SEC in tackles for loss with 15.5. He's been a really good guy just blitzing as a spy. Probably not going to see as much of a quarterback spy against Ty Simpson, but a guy that has really, wrecked and changed the game at the line of scrimmage. So that's where I'll start. I think we talked about it earlier. I think then on offense, I obviously got to go to Cam Coleman. When he is on, Auburn's offense does well. And I think if he is on this week, Auburn's offense will put them in a chance to win, give them a chance to win this game. That's the second to watch. Then thirdly, I mean, I think you got to go with, I don't even want to just say one. I'm going to just say the quarterbacks, Ash Daniels / Deuce Knight, whatever that looks like on Saturday. It's the most important position in sports. What those guys do. I think it'll be mostly Ash and Daniels, but will Deuce Knight come in and play a role? If he does, I think he's a huge player to watch. But for the rest of the game, if Ashton Daniels continues to play at the level he has, he's going to put Auburn in a good position to win.
Peter, what are you thankful for? It's Thanksgiving. What you got? Any one big thing or a couple things that you're thankful for?
I mean, I think kind of the generic stuff for me, family, friends, and then obviously, I mean, I feel like I don't talk about it enough. Thankful to be able to do this for a living. I mean, we get to Thursday and we're sitting around talking about football. So
absolutely. Peter, what is there anything that we didn't ask you about the Auburn Tigers you think, man, that's going to be a big factor or an interesting storyline to this Iron Bowl?
I think, special teams is the one area. Alex McPherson has been, a really cool kind of inspirational story this year, a guy who wasn't sure if his football career would even continue after, dealing with the gastrointestinal issues he had last year, had his large intestine removed. Now he's back on the field, had a really rough game against Missouri, and now I think he's hit 12 in a row since then, hit a career season long last week against Mercer. And, hey, we've seen plenty of Iron Bowls come down to special teams in the kicking game. That's an area that Alabama, hasn't been great in this season. So that's something to watch. And I think Alex McPherson has really been a weapon for Auburn, this season.
He's Peter Rauterkus, and you can follow him at Peter_Rauterkus on the Twitter machine. Read all of his work at AL.com, covering all things Auburn athletics for AL.com. He's doing football. He's going to get into basketball, and that's just as dramatic right now for you guys with a brand new coach and everything that they've got underway. Peter, thank you so much for your time today. If you've got any final thoughts, we'll have them, but we really, really appreciate you hanging out with us on this Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me. Looking forward to another Iron Bowl.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Peter. Have a great day. As Peter Rauterkus joining us on a Thanksgiving, and Mason, we should finish it up with the same question. I'm super thankful for everybody who listens to us, who watches us on a daily basis. I know that it's a big holiday day for everybody. I hope you're enjoying time with your family, and if you're not with your family, I hope that this little segment, gives you a little bit of joy, gets you ready for the Iron Bowl. Can't thank everybody who listens and watches us enough. Really, really thankful for my family and friends having a really, really great year. God's really blessed me in a big way. So that's what I'm thankful for. I'll just leave you the floor to kind of wrap this bad boy up, and we'll get out of here on a Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. My family, my friends, everyone I've met doing this work. And then, like Peter said, we all complain about our jobs. We complain about this job sometimes, but at the end of the day, I'm sitting here at 10:30 on a Thursday talking about football for a living. So things are going pretty well.
Absolutely. So we had a great day with you guys. I hope you enjoy the turkey, enjoy the ham, enjoy whatever you are kind of getting into on the food spread. To Black Friday, huge football slate. I know you're all excited about the Bears and Eagles at 2:00, but really we're all excited about the Egg Bowl, good old-fashioned hate, Georgia Tech, Texas A&M, Texas late in the evening. It's a huge football weekend ahead. We'll have a huge football Friday tomorrow, previewing the Iron Bowl from an Alabama perspective a little bit deeper. We'll have our 3 players to watch, our keys to the game. We'll talk about really what's going on with Black Friday, but really what's going on with this Iron Bowl. So it'll be 6:30 on ESPN, on ABC right there, and you can follow all the coverage at BamaCentral.com. We appreciate Peter Rauterkus joining us. You can follow it once again, Peter Rauterkus at Peter_Rauterkus on the Twitter machine. He's tagged in all these links today, and read all of his great work at AL.com. Enjoy the time with your family, and we'll talk to you tomorrow for a big Football Friday right here on the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral, BamaCentral.com.
Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central. Keep up with Joe on all his social media pages at Joe Gaither6. Subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and be sure to read us daily at BamaCentral.com.